Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Birchfield Penny Art Center's book club. I'm so happy that you're here with us this evening. For those of you who don't know, the book club was started in 2011 as a docent initiative. Her name was Jane Roubaix, and she convinced us all to read the works that Charles Birchfield read, so we would have a better understanding of who he was as a painter. It's since that time, however, we've switched to honor and to promote and respect the many authors in our community. There are so many authors that we have already greeted, over 90 authors, and we're actually booked until April 2025. So we have quite a long line of authors yet to discover. Tonight, though, I'm so excited to be here with Clarissa Markiewicz, who happens to be my daughter-in-law, Marcella Wetman's friend from high school. Clarissa was a graduate, I won't mention the year, of City Honors. But her writing career took off way before that. Way back in 1994, when she was only 15 years old. I already gave away her age by then. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
When she won the grand prize in the Scholastic Inc. Jackson Brown Write Lyrics contest. We'll have to ask a little bit more about that, sure, Clarissa. This award gained local and national media attention, featuring coverage in Rolling Stone. Pretty hefty for a 15-year-old. And publications of Clarissa's writing in U.S. News and World Report. She went on to earn a BA in English from The Ohio State University, where she was nominated by the faculty for the prestigious Joseph V. Denny Award in English Studies. I hope I got that right.
You did. Thank you.
Her creative nonfiction, short stories, and articles have been published in the Buffalo News and the Art Times. She continued her postgraduate education in creative writing at Harvard University, studying under the Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Paul Hardy. Shortly thereafter, she became a full-time freelance literary editor, and I already asked her about that, and maybe some of you would like to know about that as well. Ultimately working with dozens of authors on more than 200 published titles before penning her first published novel, which we featured a few years back, called Christmas, in Whimsy, which was awarded the 5-star seal by Reader's Favorite in 2021.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you're here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
A different book.
Yes.
And this book is called?
This is called The Paramour Pawn. First of all, I want to thank you, Mary. Thank you, Michaela. Thank you, everybody joining online. Thank you, everybody who came here tonight. Really appreciate all the support, and everything that you do at Birchfield Penny is wonderful, and it's exciting. And I'm so glad that you guys are here. So
well, we're happy you're here as well.
Thank you so much. So my latest book is called The Paramour Pawn. Hope you can see that. Okay. And this is actually my first mystery. The first book I wrote, Christmas in Whimsy, was much more very sort of heartwarming, lighthearted, holiday, magical type of a story. Sort of think TV holiday movie in a book. The Paramour Pawn is a cozy mystery, to be sure. So definitely not, a huge departure. There's no violence, there's no, grit or anything. But there is a lot of, it's sort of a lot more soul searching, I would say, in this one.
A little darker. Cross between the Gilmore Girls and Perry Mason.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much for that comparison. I appreciate it. I'm fans of both of those works. So yes. The book, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more during the discussion, was very much a product of two sort of phases. The first phase, which was writing more about, the cozy mystery, something that's a little more, cozy, small town, amateur detective. And that sort of phase of the writing happened, I'm going to say about 7 years ago now. I set it aside. I came back to it again during the pandemic. So I think just saying that explains some of the darkness that you're talking about. And we'll definitely get into it more during the discussion.
Hey, would you be kind enough to read us a little bit?
I would love to, yes. I'm just going to start at the beginning. There's a lot of complexity in the book, and I think that if I start any further in, it's just going to be confusing. So I'm going to start at the beginning. Chapter 1. The whole world changed when Eleanor Shore crouched down outside the shop's door sill and peered at the magnifying glass app on her phone. Bits of crunched leaves and dirt, a potato bug trundling along a crack in the sidewalk, all looked alien when blown up on the screen. Eleanor paused briefly to admire the strangeness of this skewed reality before impatience ordered her to move along. She searched for a shard of glass, a cigarette butt, anything the cops may have missed when investigating this latest hit by the Willamette Drive burglar. There had been other store burglaries all up and down Willamette Drive over the past 2 months, 7 others to be exact. This was the first Eleanor had examined. She stood slowly, angling her digital magnifier over the door jamb. The ends of her hair brushed over her shoulders, one gray shaking loose and skittering down her arm like a reminder to pick up this month's box of Nice and Easy, 6W, light mocha brown. It was a detail of real life, a detail that would never make it into an investigator's report. It's now 7:32 a.m., Monday, October 19th, Eleanor muttered to herself, her voice just as petite as the rest of her, as she scanned the door's bruised face. Where once there had been cheery glass panels inviting one and all to find your sound at Musicopia in stenciled letters, there was now a perfunctory plywood bandage. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Saturday, October 17th, the Willamette Drive burglar struck again. The police have picked over the scene, it's been cleared, and customers resumed their weekend jaunts into the lush melodies and vast terrain of Musicopia's aisles. If any clues have been left behind, it'll take one dogged detective to track them down. The front display window had been spared any trauma, though with the season of goblins and witches settling its fog thick over the town, the shop already had its own decor of macabre light. Giant gray cardboard tombstones, each bearing the name and life dates of a legendary musician, loomed over a field of jack-o'-lanterns and featured records. Musicopia, like its neighboring businesses, lived all month long in its costume, one masked face in a whole parade of shops dressed in Halloween garb. Eleanor tucked her phone in her back jeans pocket and turned to face the town as it greeted its new week. The arterial Willamette Drive flowed through Lark Harbor, Oregon, the same as it always did, burglaries or not. Shop owners and managers were starting to move around inside their stores, doing the dance of the opening procedures that included restocking shelves and bringing tills to registers. 2 doors down, at aisle-style clothiers, the sidewalk sandwich board had already been set out. Spooky sale at the top, spelled out in letters cut from glittery velvet fabric with a bat pattern swooping over it. The whoosh of cars and yellow school buses rose and fell as they passed Eleanor in one of the 2 traffic lanes, heading east or west. A jogger huffed by, his breath in sync with his footfalls. And thanks to a waylaid summer that had apparently decided late was, indeed, better than never, the unseasonable 64-degree morning had dog walkers sauntering in long-sleeve tees and jeans, rather than hugging flannel jackets close around them and rushing their pooches to do their business. This block of Willamette was the crest of the highest hill in town, and if you stood out in the street on a day as clear as this one, which Eleanor had done once or twice before, you were greeted by a panoramic view of residential side streets, the city of Eberhardt's skyline to the south, and the sparkling harbor itself to the west, with the white-capped Pacific splashing beyond. Not that you needed to see the ocean to know it was there on a day when the warm air carried its briny scent inland. Usually, this was a scent that went with fireworks smoke, grilled hot dogs, or oil from any number of transient rides at the 2-week-long Lark Harbor Carnival. It went with coconut suntan lotion, which Eleanor wore religiously in summer, lest her pale skin burn. Sea air didn't, in her opinion, go well with fallen leaves pattering as they turned red and gold cartwheels down the sidewalk. Life goes on, Eleanor muttered, continuing her narration as she took in the street's bustle. If anything has changed in the wake of these burglaries, it's that the routine has become more important. Neighbors close their drapes to the unexpected. Passers-by dig their hands into their pockets and their gaze into the ground. The only time people talk about any of it is to reiterate what everyone already thinks. Real talk, talk that might lead to solutions or accountability, could make the criminal nervous, stir up more trouble. No one wants a target on their back. No one wants their treasures stolen. Across the street from Musicopia, the shopkeeper's bell tinged over the door at the Fritter Away Cafe, and Maria Contreras backed out, holding the push bar with her body while carrying a takeout coffee cup in each hand. She waited at the curb for a break in traffic to cross. Her auburn curls, Garnier Nutrice, True Red 66, glinting in the rising sun like the autumnal tufts not yet shed by the trees. With the back of one occupied hand, she pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose, and she raised the other cup in greeting to Eleanor. Maria was the reason this crime scene was different for Eleanor. Sure, the burglaries had already been cause for concern before this. Eleanor worried for herself and her loved ones, and for the hometown she'd only just returned to a few years ago. But when Musicopia was ripped off, so was Maria. She had all but paid for a limited edition Cyndi Lauper box set. Expensive no matter how you looked at it, but very expensive on the salary of the currently part-time music teacher for Eberhardt's Yellowed Middle Public School. It was a rare indulgence Maria had put on layaway for weeks and had partly paid for by giving free, loud, one might say painful French horn lessons to the owner's son. Eleanor had to at least try to get it back for her. As Maria crossed the street, Eleanor wrapped up the narration that was part of the experiment she'd thought to try this morning, taking a look at the very real Willamette Drive burglaries from a new creative angle, based in a world of fiction Eleanor visited often. She said to herself, "Your mission, Detective Hardwick of the Heightened Crime Investigation Unit, is to track down those clues the police might have missed. You have relied on your M-peeping to examine the latest crime scene, where the sonar slasher has once again used his mutant power to shatter glass and gain entry to his victim's dwelling. Your M-peeping has failed to uncover any new clues. What's the next logical step, Detective Hardwick?" "One apple pie latte," said Maria, holding out a cup to her. Eleanor smiled, her dimples deep, and not just because it was time for her pre-work chat with her best friend. "A stakeout," she answered herself. The thought gave her a little thrill, a buzz of excitement in her gut, like when her pawn took the lead on a roll and move game board. That's the next step. Just sit and wait if that's what it takes to bring this guy in. It may take all night. It may take days. Certainly, it'll take a determined detective, mutant or not. As quickly as the buzz had come on, though, it faded again. Detective Hardwick could use her mutant abilities to solve any crime, but real detective work, serious detective work, was out of Eleanor Shore's league. She was no real policewoman, no gumshoe. She just liked to play games. "I'm sorry," said Maria, "but am I talking to my friend Eleanor, or are you Detective Hardhat with the Crazy Mutant Cop Unit?" "It's Detective Hardwick," Eleanor corrected her, "from the Heightened Crime Investigation Unit. Don't make fun of me and my RPG." They began walking together. Hey, I'm not making fun. I just want you to remember that no one becomes a real detective just because they play one in Mutant City Blues or any other role-playing game. RPG, not role-playing game, Eleanor corrected her. It's an RPG. Right, RPG. If you're going to hang around with me, you have to get the lingo right. Sure, I wouldn't want to sound uncool or anything, Maria teased. Eleanor turned to face her. I could hear you rolling your eyes just then, you know. Yeah, is that one of your mutant powers? Ha ha, track down your own back set. Eleanor put her nose in the air, though her dimples didn't fade. Wait, I always liked that Detective Hardhead. With a shared giggle, they walked back to the north side of the street, crossing under an enormous vinyl banner, staked to lampposts on either curb and snapping in the breeze. Annual Willamette Drive, trick-or-treat-a-thon, Halloween night, 6:30 to 8:30, games, candy, prizes. Come early for crafts and eats. Stay late for moonlight hayrides. The women headed west toward the next block and the gaming shop Eleanor owned with her husband. Their pride and joy, the game's Afoot, had just celebrated its 2nd birthday last month. For the time Eleanor had been away from Lark Harbor and living in San Francisco during her 20s and 30s, her career in public relations had meant long hours, demanding clients, and a corporate structure she had no hand in designing, yet was expected to follow religiously. None of that would have bothered her much if the work hadn't become so unfulfilling. When she and her husband decided it was time for both of them to pursue a new challenge, they'd been approaching 40. And though opening their own business proved to be harder work than any they had faced in the corporate world, the satisfaction they got from it fueled them with an energy neither had felt since college. Yes, there were days when Eleanor yearned once again to feel the reassuring hand of oversight on her shoulder, letting her know how to handle a problem. There were nights when she and her husband stayed up until winter's gray dawn, crunching cold numbers after post-holiday slumps. Once, she had looked up the quote, "Do something you'll love and you'll never work a day in your life," to see whom she could accurately blame for spouting such nonsense. She found that while the quote had been attributed to everyone from Confucius to Mark Twain to some professor 30 years ago, no one actually knew for sure who said it first. Whoever had come up with it, though, Eleanor knew this about them. They'd never owned their own business. It was precisely because she loved the games Afoot so much that she worked as hard as she did. And she loved the store because they did more than just sell a product. Games, particularly RPGs like Mutant City Blues, gave people a safe, fun place to explore, open their minds. Rounds on a board or the riffle of collectible game cards did it in their own way. But RPGs were about creating a character, and in fact, a whole world along with other players. There was no physical playing surface, only the structure of an outline, of a story outlined in the game's handbook. And events unfolded in the all-important imagination of the game moderator and player characters. The daily grind of real life didn't allow much time to build imagination. Yet Eleanor believed that imagination needed to be exercised regularly, like a muscle, if one hoped to run with possibility. That, along with problem solving, social interaction, working together, all of it came at no additional charge with every game sold. Narrating the last Willamette Drive crime scene as though it were just a play scenario from Mutant City Blues, and Eleanor just a game moderator, made her more keen to her physical surroundings, more observant of people's behavior. That was what she told herself anyway. Perhaps her nose really would catch the stale fumes of a missed question or a sweet honey of a lead. Putting the scene into the gaming world gave her a perspective no real detective was going to tap into. Would it mean she'd see a clue that trained, experienced cops had overlooked? Doubtful, unless the Lark Harbor PD had been replaced overnight with its own set of mutants, seriously inept ones. But trained, experienced cops had their own routines. Shining a light on the crime from a new angle, any new angle, could cast a different shadow, one that perhaps belonged to the burglar himself. At the very least, it made Eleanor feel useful. Usefulness was a feeling that had been in short supply lately. I think that's probably a good place to stop and start the discussion.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I have a couple questions for
Yes.
you. I want to start with the idea of a fairy godmother.
Yes.
Godmother, no fairy in there, just godmother.
Well, yeah, okay.
Fairy godmother.
Fairy godmother. Yeah.
Okay, and so that notion of a fairy godmother, not exactly like Cinderella might have had.
No, no. And in fact, there's a reference that Eleanor makes in a little while when she's talking with Maria about this. Sorry, I've got eye drops, so I'm very sorry, but I'm leaking a little bit. Where she talks about how, she sort of introduces the rules of this world, because it's not a fairy godmother in terms of, I have my magic wand and I can just wave it around and, make everything happen, because otherwise this book certainly wouldn't be this long. It would just be solved in about 3 seconds. So no, she says, if I could just bibbity boppity my way to an answer on these things, or finding the burglar, or world peace for that matter, then she would. So it's definitely something where creating the rules for what that meant. I knew that I wanted to have this fairy godmother figure, but creating those rules around it had to work with this idea of a mystery and going through the sort of normal paces that you're going to see an amateur detective go through.
And so is that a convention that you created, or is that notion something that you've historically existed?
So it's kind of both. I think, as far as I know, I created some of it. I'm sure that, there are no news stories, so I'm sure somewhere along the line someone did something similar, but it's based in, I really like stories that take a sort of supernatural idea and make it more as realistic as it possibly can be. So a superhero who gets bitten by a spider, or a story where a scientific something or other will explain why somebody has supernatural abilities. In this case, I relied heavily on Celtic myth, and Eleanor has sort of realized this gift as part of her heritage. Specifically through her mother's line, where she's just got, you can call it a fairy godmother, but she's basically got a very, very keen sense of insight into whoever she is tasked with. She calls it fostering, whoever she's tasked with, seeing their deepest wish come true. And that's what she does, just sort of explain a little bit about what her process is and why it can't just be like I snap my fingers and everything's okay. She gets tasked with what she calls charges. So for instance, she'll kind of be going about her day, and then all of a sudden she will feel this very heavy pressure that says, okay, I now have a new charge. I now have someone I need to work with. I need to find what their deepest wish is. And she does this through sort of a telepathic journey into their subconscious to find out what their deepest wish is. And sometimes they don't even know what their deepest wish is. And she works with this person. She usually does it in a fairly quick amount of time. And once she knows what that wish is, she will communicate that to what she calls the great energy, and what her family is known as the great energy. And that is the energy that binds us all. George Lucas would call it the Force. There are obviously many other interpretations of that through mythology and through the ages. And that's sort of how the process works. And once she's communicated this wish, the great energy will make changes in itself, changes to its fabric, possibly changes to the timeline, so that this particular charge can make their wish happen. And usually it's something where it's not necessarily like, oh, I want a ton of money. It's going to be something that it's almost the butterfly effect, whether or not it's a big deal to the individual, although it does change his or her life in some way. It's probably going to have some greater effect for keeping the universe at balance.
One of the sweetest parts of the book, at least from my perspective, was how the great energy was described by her grandmother.
Thank you.
Would you share a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Let's see if I can.
The seeds and
It's well, basically, I think what you're talking about is when she talks about how the great energy is the garden, that her grandmother, who has, along with her mother, Eleanor's grandmother and mother, they've really introduced her into this gift that they had and that they are now passing on to her. And so her grandmother, who loves to garden, uses this metaphor of the great energy is the garden. We are all the flowers, the different, and all the elements are different seeds, different flowers, but the great energy is this garden that brings all of us together. Because Eleanor is 9 years old when she first sort of taps into this gift. And she's, obviously very sort of like overwhelmed by this whole idea. And she's trying to make sense of it in terms of what she already knows. So she asks her grandmother, is that like God? And her grandmother says, I think something to the effect of, God is an entity. The great energy is not one single entity. It is this whole unifying force.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And my other question is, why gaming? Like, do you do role playing?
I don't really do role playing, although for the book, I did a lot of research with it, and I have a huge respect for people who do role playing because it can get very involved. I don't know if anybody is really familiar with it, but it's a very involved world.
Do it, but we don't do it.
Okay. And so this is kind of where I was talking about this book was sort of born into two separate realms, I guess, two separate, ages. I knew I wanted to write a cozy mystery, and this is going back, again, like 7 years. And before I wrote Christmas and Whimsy and before I published, I knew I wanted to write a cozy mystery. And every cozy mystery, at least that I know of, has an amateur detective, has, the florist detective, the bookseller detective, the cookie maker detective. And so it was just a question of who's going to be my detective? What does she do? It just so happened that my cousin had given me a game for Christmas that year that we had loved as kids, called Fantasy Forest. And I was really over the moon about getting it. It's out of print. It's been out of print for a long time. He found it on eBay. And it's this great board game that has all this amazing art and this great backstory and all these characters. And I was like, I love this game. And that sort of happened right around the time I was searching for what is it that I want this detective to do. And so it just, game store owner, let's go with that. And then it sort of fits. When you think about a game store and puzzles and deduction and strategy, it all kind of meshed together. So,
and your fairy godmother must have been charged with what you were searching for.
Yes, I think so. Absolutely.
And you received it.
The game was there. The great energy made the game happen. Absolutely.
I'm wondering about that box that she uses when she's overwhelmed with emotion. And
yes.
Would you describe it to everyone?
Sure.
And then my real question though is, do you use a device like that?
I sort of do. I'll describe this first. It's when she was young and starting to first understand this gift, her mother gave her a really mysterious, sort of ancient board game, or at least something that looked like a board game. And she said, whenever you start to get overwhelmed with a charge, because you're going to, once you've been tasked with this charge, you're going to start feeling their emotion. You're sort of one with this person. And you're going to have to get to a place where you learn how to separate out the very strong emotion you're getting from this other individual so that you can tell what their feelings are and what your feelings are. So when that happens, when you start to feel overwhelmed by a charges individual, here is a model that you can use for sort of imagining in your mind, taking, pretend you have it on a card, pretend you have that emotion on a card. Say you're feeling overwhelmed by the charges sadness. So imagine a card that says sadness, and you put it into this game board. And she's given her this physical game board to kind of imagine it. But once she starts to really work with charges, she then just starts imagining this game board in her head that's based on this sort of model that her mother gave her. And all it is basically a blank box with a gridded game board box inside of it, almost like a checkerboard, except a little bit bigger, that she can then, in her mind, close up and then put up on a game shelf. So when you're feeling very, very overwhelmed, sort of take that emotion, stick it in this game board, put it into the game box, put it away for now until you can really have some distance from it to give it its due, to really sort of reflect on it if you need to, or bring it off of that shelf again.
And do you use advice such as that?
I've actually tried doing that. So when I sort of started to play with that idea, I was like, let's see if this makes me feel any better. And I was feeling overwhelmed by the idea of coming up with something that held your overwhelmed feelings. So I said, let's do that. And I really did. I imagined this game board. I imagined sticking a card on a grid that said overwhelmed, and then closing up the game board, putting it in a box, and filing it away. And I got to tell you, it felt, like there was relief there. It was like, oh, okay, I can deal with that later. That can, I'm not saying never, I'll deal with it at some point. We all know, deal with your emotions. But in that moment, it was very sort of like a release. So I thought, okay, I think I'm going to go with this, because if it works for me, then it'll work for Eleanor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk a little bit about community, because
Yes.
she had the community of the people who play games.
Mhm.
She had the community of the town, the community of the police department was its own community.
Sure.
The community of the country club.
Yep.
And so community seemed to be a thread that wound its way throughout the book. And
Absolutely. Yes, it is. And this is actually something that came into the writing. I always knew it was going to be a small town, so you're always going to have some element of community in that. But this is actually speaks more toward the writing that happened during the pandemic. During this time when we had all of our control, or I guess illusion of control, taken away from us, I think there was an opportunity there in all of the sort of, all of the darkness that was going on. There was an opportunity for people to come together as a bigger community. And I think in some cases people did, and I think in some cases people didn't. And I wanted to explore that idea in all these different sort of microcosms that you were just mentioning. I think that the gaming community, it's interesting because, and this was research that I did at a gaming store near me in Rochester, is so close knit in a lot of ways, or at least the gaming community I saw was so close knit. And then to kind of wander outside of that and start to see other communities that weren't as close knit. Again, it was something that I just sort of wanted to examine a little bit more closely and see what pushed people maybe to want to become closer, what pushed people away from that, what pushed people to going away from that in favor of trying to grab more control over their lives when they'd lost so much control. So that was why there were a lot of, as you said, a lot of different.
You detected
communities.
loneliness too. In
Yes.
some of the characters.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want to share too much about that, but
Yeah, that exactly. I don't want to give away too much, but absolutely the loneliness, the idea that there are two characters in particular that I kind of see as opposite sides of the coin. They both have been betrayed. They both have been disappointed in life. They both have had their expectations kind of ripped away from them. And one of them, has sort of given up then and really becomes sort of cold, sort of searching, sort of lost and lonely, probably makes some mistakes, but is basically someone who is just still searching. And I would like to think that at some point, if that person is able to, they would be able to, kind of find their way back to having faith in their fellow person. The other side of that coin is someone who definitely gives up completely on having faith in his fellow person, and rather just wrests control wherever he possibly can. And that control ultimately leads to the murder in the book.
we won't share who.
No, that's the thing. I hope that I'm not being too utterly vague here. I don't want to, spoilers. So,
well, you had great characters.
Thank you.
And I thought her husband was an interesting character.
Thank you. Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about him and the role he played?
Sure, Lawrence. So Lawrence is, as she describes him, her rock. And I wanted these two to have just the most loving relationship. Not one, it's not going to, no relationship is peachy, happy, joyful all the time. If it is, there's probably something wrong there. But and they do have their different disagreements, absolutely. Particularly when Eleanor starts really investigating this murder. He worries about her. And yet he doesn't worry about her and say, you have to stop doing this. This is, something that you shouldn't be doing. You're not a cop. You're not an investigator. He says, okay, you want to do this? Do it. Go learn how to be an investigator, but do it safely, because of course he's concerned about her, especially as things sort of escalate. And I think that's what, they have this real understanding between them. They started out as best friends. They were best friends for years. And so, it's sort of like going into a marriage, having that foundation already, is always, I think, going to give you a better chance toward a happy marriage. Or at least I think a lot of the time, maybe not always. But that's what, that's what they are to each other. They are grounding to each other. They are each other's dreams. At one point, we learn about how they started this business, and, she thinks about how they were in San Francisco, and she sort of hit this point with her job where she just couldn't take any more of the corporate nonsense that was going on. And she goes home to him and she thinks, I think we need a new start. I think we need a fresh start. And his response to that is, finally. Yeah. And he's right on board with her the whole way. And she's right on board with him the whole way. And again, yes, disagreements, but I think that there's an understanding there that really truly makes them each other's partner.
So when he first suggested she take along Big Blue, Big blue?
Old blue.
Old blue.
Old
I thought
blue.
it was going to be a gun.
Thank you. That was the intent, was to sort of throw you a little with old
Yes.
blue. Yeah. No, old blue. This is not. I don't think this isn't a huge spoiler.
Yep.
So, yeah, old blue is the biggest purse known to man. It's just a big blue purse, basically, and it fits every single thing you could possibly think of in there. And I think probably every woman kind of knows what I'm talking about, has had at some point a big or an old blue or some version of that. And it actually, it not only is this purse that carries everything, but it's become sort of a talisman for Eleanor, because she carried it one day. She was in San Francisco. She carried it and she was parking in a garage. And it just so happens that she hears an attack going on, near her in the garage. And Eleanor's nature is to run toward trouble. Her nature is to help people. So she runs, she doesn't even really think about it. She runs toward the sounds of this attack, and she takes old blue and she wallops the guy in the back of the head here, which is sort of a nerve center, and basically incapacitates him for a little while so that she can, go into her bag, find something to like bind him up, and then calls the cops. She starts carrying old blue after that. This actually happens again at a later date, different garage, same sort of thing happens. And she manages to do the same thing. So now she just carries this purse everywhere that she can, whenever she senses trouble, she's going to carry this purse. So that is, I think, a testament to any woman who wants to carry a really, really, really big purse. If anybody teases you about it, ignore them, because it will come in handy.
Is that based on your own life experience as well?
No, although the whole idea of carrying something too much on one shoulder and it's heavy is, I think I have a back problem because of that. But yeah, no.
That was pretty cute. And I told you I love the names of the various stores.
The businesses, yeah.
The business that had the glass fishing
The floats.
bobbers.
Yes.
Floats.
Yeah.
I mean, just so curious that you came up with that.
Thank you. Thank you. That was,
Are there real businesses like that?
I don't know, but I mean, there's certainly, galleries of all kinds.
Right.
And it was just something that I honestly don't even remember. I remember researching glass floats. I must have come across it at some point and said, oh, this would be a really, the gallery, the glass floats gallery. This would be a really pretty thing to have, and at a seaside community. And it made me so sad to think of it as, we never really see the glass floats. We hear it from her memory of it,
Right.
but of course, it's one of the businesses that's been burgled. And at the very beginning of the story, it's kind of there to really give you this sense of sadness over these burglaries. Sometimes we hear about something like a burglary and we kind of make it into this abstract thing. That was meant to really personalize it for the reader and for Eleanor.
And then again, her own store being broken
Yes.
into. And want to talk about the title of the book? And
Sure. So the Paramour pawn actually references a collectible piece from a game that was originally, it came out in around 1977. It was a board game that it was a flat board with like 3D elements. And the game was called Island of Deception. And it had these characters, and you could, be these different characters in the game. All these different types of characters. And one of those characters was the Paramour pawn. And a few years ago, somebody decided to create a limited edition of this game, along with beautiful pieces of porcelain art to, represent each of these characters of the game. And within these porcelain pieces, there was a real gem. Highly collectible, highly expensive. And Eleanor, when she first opened her store, got her hands on one and said, this is going to be the first piece in my collectibles area. of the game store. And it always sort of reminded her whenever things were hard, whenever things got difficult, either, business-wise or setting up the business, it always reminded her, but I've got this collectible, and it means so much to have this collectible there. And that is what is stolen, along with a few of her other collectibles, that, that sort of kicks off her part in the story. So that's what the Paramour pawn is. That game, the Paramour pawn, it is all fictional. It was fun coming up with, but that's what that is. It also refers to, in some ways, one of the main characters. And I'm going to leave it at that,
right?
Because again, don't want to give too much away.
Right. And I loved all your little, as I told you when you first walked in, I just love of everything. Now I can't think of the one I wanted to mention. The plumbing,
pipe dreams.
Pipe dreams, right?
Yeah,
it was just so darling and
Thank
so
you.
funny.
Thank you.
Pipe
dreams. Plumbing. Yeah.
Right, pipe dream plumbing was just so cute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
So,
it was fun. That's what one of the things I enjoyed most about the book, about working on it, was coming up with this town, creating this, all the different elements of the town. You have this business section, with all of its different shops and personalities. You have the North Harbor with the country club. You have the South Harbor with, sort of the more, port, working class warehouse area. It's very much, a study, I think, in all the different elements of a town. And of course, obviously that's going to be a stand-in for us, for our society, for the country. So yeah, it was fun coming up with it. It was, interesting to kind of take those deep dives sometimes into these different areas, what they represented, the people who came from these different areas, and how they interacted and their different expectations.
And I loved how the main character, Eleanor, noodled her way into the various, including the morgue.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the morgue. That was fun. Dr. Yago.
Yes, how she managed to.
He's a trip.
Yeah, it was great. I feel like I know him.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Excellent. He was one of those characters who just sort of jumped off and was his own guy. He was out there. But yeah, thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about your other job, which is the editing job.
Sure.
Which is so interesting to me.
Sure.
What that looks like. And
yeah.
what's it like to? I have a friend who actually reads for Audible. So she comes across a lot of books in her line of work, and you must as well.
I do. And I got to tell you, Audible, that reading, I mean, just now read it. It is so difficult. I have such a total respect for people who can really read, an entire novel. I mean, obviously you take breaks and things like that, and there are cuts and edits, but still in all, and people who do different voices, and it is such an art form. I actually have a friend, Pilar, who does voiceover work, and it kind of astounds me. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, the editing is something I've done for a while now, many years, and it brings me in contact with a lot of different authors, a lot of different work. It's something that, you're always going to learn something from anything that you ingest, especially when it comes to your own, work, your own field. So in working with some of these different authors, it's helped me become a better writer too. Very different material. I write very different stuff from anything I edit. But it's an interesting job. And it also, I really love the sort of nitty-gritty of grammar and language. It gives me a chance to really sort of dive into that. If anybody is ever interested in really making your brain hurt when it comes to grammar, read the Chicago Manual of Style, because that's something that's definitely I'm sorry, my old English teacher just walked in, so I can't talk anymore.
Yeah.
No, my English, not old. No, my former English. I can't
Welcome.
say anymore,
Thank you for coming.
clearly, because, oh my God. No, but in any case, no, it's a wonderful job. It's a very interesting job. And it's, as I said, it's made me a better writer, I think.
Well, good.
Yeah.
I've asked a lot of questions, so now I'm going to open it up. Anyone else like to ask a question?
Yes.
Hi.
Shelley, yes.
Oh, I have not read the book yet, but I will be.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Can't wait to read it. In fact,
Thank you.
the floats. I'm a beach glass collector. It's one of the holy grails of collecting beach glass. If you can find a float, you've made it. It's like finding an orange piece or a pink piece.
Yes.
So around here, very few that I'm aware of have been found. So, but anyhow, it's a beach glass collecting thing. And there's websites. There's so many websites now
Yes.
on Facebook. So, the other thing,
They're beautiful. I just want
they are beautiful. They're
you know, the little bit that I was able to really glean, because you're absolutely right. I mean, this takes place in Oregon, so in a coastal town. So,
right.
you know, it's one of those, and it's a gallery. And it's exactly why it wasn't like, hey, buy your glass floats, because of that. Exactly, right? You know, what you just said. But they are gorgeous.
The other thing is, I would suspect that maybe the burglaries
Yeah.
are the common community issue. That's just a thought from what you said. And the third thing is, I would suspect that these burglaries are very personal. That's just my take from what you've said, not having read the book.
Yeah, I would say it's the first community issue we come across in the book. There are a lot of community issues, both that come to the fore and also that are going on sort of on a more subtle level. But yes, absolutely, it's the first one. You're spot on the personal connection. And I mean, it's going to be personal, because these are business owners who have really, they're small business owners. They've created their shops from the ground up. And you really start to get that feeling from Eleanor and from everything that she and Lawrence her husband have done in order to create their store. I hope that one of the things I hope is that you are able to sort of understand from that how much heart and hard work go into all the other stores that are around them as well. And I hope you enjoy it.
I will. Thank you.
You will. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So you did such a wonderful job of developing the characters,
Thank you.
but they're not finished at the end. So is there another book coming?
Yes, there is. It is designed as a serial, definitely. And now I apologize for having my back to the camera here. Let me back up a little. Yes, it is designed as a serial. Absolutely. And again, not to give too much away, but certainly in Eleanor's journey, this starts out with basically the end of this book is almost a rebirth for her. And in a couple of different ways. And now she has to start navigating her life in a very different way from what has come before. And I'm anxious to see what that looks like.
Well, good, me too, because I want to know what happened.
Thank you. They will be coming back. Some of the secondary characters will be coming back eventually.
Have you started that book already?
No, I'm actually currently working on a follow-up to Whimsy, to Christmas and Whimsy. So
Maybe you find a different holiday too. Maybe
No,
there's a
and
funny book
that's the
coming
other
out.
thing, is they won't all have to do with holiday. The thing is, this really came out of a lot of exploration into adaptation, and again, that part of the story was born of the pandemic. the idea that the only control we have is to adapt with the circumstances we have no control over. And that's certainly something that is prevalent in Eleanor's journey. It takes place in autumn because I love Halloween, but really it takes place in autumn because that is nature's adapting. That is what it does every year, effortlessly, or at least effortlessly to our perspective. I wanted that to symbolize what she's going through. And there's a lot of, there are a lot of
transitioning from one to the next.
right, exactly. And there are a lot of mentions of the leaves changing. And that's not just to sort of remind you that we're in autumn, but it's very much a reflection of where she's, sort of moving from place to place.
You really have an uncanny ability to create a space and a place
Thank
that
you.
we walk in when we read the book.
Thank you.
I felt it in Whimsy, and I felt it in this book as well. And you're very good at that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As I said, it's so much fun to create these things. And I have more of a problem creating a story sometimes. The setting, I can sit there and just write a setting, and it's fun for me. That's where my real joy comes in until I find the story, and until I start to really dig into these characters and figure out what is it that what are the questions they're trying to answer about their lives. And then, of course, by extension, what are the questions I'm trying to answer about my life, and what maybe other people are trying to answer. But thank you for saying that, because I very much enjoy, that's got to be my favorite part, I think.
Well, it shows in the writing.
Thank
very
you.
much so.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so
tonight.
much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us online, and everyone here. It's a thrill to see everybody.
Now we have to ask your former, not old teacher.
Oh, boy.
The old fits.
Did you recognize talent way back then?
First of all, welcome home, Clarissa.
Thank you, Mr. This is,
well,
this is James Duggan, just an amazing English teacher, a wonderful person. And were it not for you, I would not be here. So thank you.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you very much. Her talent was very, very evident very early on. I think I had you freshman and sophomore year.
Sophomore year.
Yes.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't know the story of Clarissa's rise to fame at City Honors.
I bet we're going to learn about it.
I'll try to make it brief. She entered a piece in a national writing competition, and we'd pretty much forgotten about it.
Yeah.
And I got a call one day from New York City, and our classroom was up on the 3rd floor, so I had to make my way down to the main office. And this lady said, your student, Clarissa Markiewicz, has won the competition for the nation. I said, my goodness. And, I said, it's coming back a bit. She said, somebody will be in school tomorrow to let you know that Jackson Brown will be coming to City Honors as part of the award. Well, I had to tell the principal, and he thought Jackson Brown was a patient at an asylum.
You probably didn't know who Clarissa was, because she probably never got sent to the principal.
Oh, wow.
Fortunately, the guidance counselor was a great big fan of Jackson Brown, and she happened to be walking by, and I called her in, and she said, Jackson Brown. And from that point on, it was, the whole place lit up. But yes, those were your, I don't want to say your initial forays into writing, but I mean, she was always just a pleasure to read. It was, sometimes the bane of an English teacher's existence is having these stacks of papers to go through. But the beauty of having students like Clarissa was the fact that it was always a joy to read. And so, do you remember the piece? I mean, Jackson actually put her piece to music, came to the school, put on full concert in front of, we had to turn people away.
Yeah.
I had friends coming out of the woodwork, who, you know, we want to accommodate, we just don't have room for you.
It was a pretty big, I have to tell one quick story about this. Because I don't know if you remember how you broke the news to me, my friend.
You were down in the gym. Yes.
Okay, no. But see, the nice man you see sitting here by you, okay. So my English teacher comes down to the gym, right smack dab during my gym class. He says, Clarissa, the principal wants to see you. And I said, okay. Now bear in mind, please, that I was 15 years old. I was acting out. I had done one or two things that may have gotten me sent to the principal's office if anyone ever found out about them. Nothing terrible. So my English teacher coming down and saying, the principal wants to see you was certainly cause for concern. And I said, okay, should I, change or, and I believe you said, I think you should get your stuff. I said, oh my God. No, it gets worse. It gets worse. So we're walking down the hallway toward the principal's office. And Mr. Duggan says, what did you do? And I'm thinking, don't say anything. Don't admit to anything until they have you on something. I don't know what this could possibly be. So by the time we get to the principal's office, I am of course in this tizzy of, oh my God. And you sit me down in the office, you go out to get the principal, was it Mr. and Elliot? Point, okay, Mr. Ellie and my guidance counselor. You come in with the principal, with my guidance counselor. Was this bad? And you go, Clarissa, did you enter a contest a few months ago? And yes. Well, you won. And I burst into tears, and it had nothing to do with winning. Do with the fact that I was not about to be expelled. Thank you, Mr. Duggan.
We did have a nice occasion we had dinner with Jackson Brown, and we had a real nice opportunity to talk to him about his writing, which I have always thought was something very, very powerful in our society, especially at that time.
Yeah.
He was so worried that the students at City Honors wouldn't have any clues to his music.
Yeah.
But it was really, he walked away from the place so impressed with some of the questions that students asked and some of the things that he found out about the school at the time.
Yeah.
But of course, the mere mention of Clarissa's name always brings joy. Anyone who was there, I mean, people who weren't even in the school at the time said, I remember when Jackson Brown came to City. And then didn't we also attend a concert of his at Shays?
I was not there for that. No.
All right, well, then I will tell this part of the story.
Sure.
Another bunch of people called me because he was doing a thing at Shays, and they said, can we go? I said, well, we can get tickets. Yeah, we'll do. And then afterwards, I was getting nudged. We've got to go backstage and meet him afterwards. I saw this line down. I said, no, there's no way. So ultimately we went down, and his sort of like bodyguard, a guy named Buddha, he spotted me, and he had some faint recognition, and he said, you're from the school? And I said, yeah. And he said, that young lady, the wrote the beautiful piece. I said, yes, yeah. He said, come on. 12 of us went in downstairs and backstage of Shays, and Jackson Brown stopped everything when we walked in, and he entertained for 20 minutes. He talked with us. I felt like the biggest big shot in it was wonderful.
He was a special person.
Of course, he asked for you, and for years afterwards, I corresponded with him at the holiday times, and he always mentioned how favorably he was impressed.
Wow.
But also with you.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
that's nice. Yeah, and thank
Wow.
you for coming tonight. And
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry I was so late.
That's all right.
Coached the golf team at St. Joe's, and we had a match out in Wanaka, and so.
Thank you so much
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, everybody who was online. I really appreciate it. I don't know if we had questions from anybody
oh,
online.
we should ask.
If anyone does have a question, just unmute yourself and you can ask.
No, that's fine.
And so I hope that everyone will join us on October 19th. That's 2 weeks from tonight. For a book called Yesteryear by Stephen Yano. Did I say that correctly? He's been with us before. He's great. And this book called Yesteryear is about the Lone Ranger who had a tie to Buffalo, New York. So that should be
Oh.
very interesting. But I hope you'll come back again.
Thank you so much.
When your sequel is written or number 2 Whimsy is finished, and we'd love to see you again.
Thank you so
So
much.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank
so
you
much.
very much.
St. John's.
Yeah.
All right, good night, everyone online.